Machine learning, AI, intelligent automation, and robotic process automation are trending technologies that are redefining the software and IT industry as we know it. In fact, robotic process automation, also known as RPA, is becoming a crucial skill necessary for any software developer. More and more companies are quickly realizing the advantage that RPA provides, and those who have already started developing these RPA skills will be first in line for better and higher paying careers. Hi, my name is Michael Taiska, and welcome to this hands-on RPA with UiPath. This course is designed to take you from absolute RPA beginner all the way through expert in the shortest time possible. I will walk you through step by step the foundations of UiPath, the essentials of RPA lifecycle, and how to build scalable bots using RPA best practice, a useful skill necessary for anyone in the RPA space. Section 1 will start by explaining what is RPA and the benefits of RPA as a developer. In Section 2, you will learn the UiPath basics, and I'll show you some of the most common activities that you will encounter on any RPA project. In Section 3, we'll go a little bit further and we'll discuss in detail Excel and Datatables. Section 4, we'll set up our Outlook email and we'll see how email automation works in UiPath. In Section 5, we'll discuss the RPA lifecycle and you will see how to decide if a process is fit for automation. We'll then look at the roles and responsibilities for key members on the RPA project. In Section 6, we'll discuss automation's best practices and we'll look at the UiPath reframework template. I will also discuss with you industry tips and lessons learned. In Section 7, you will see how to provision your UiPath robot with Orchestrator. And finally, in Section 8, we'll put all of this knowledge together and we'll create our first end-to-end enterprise robot. If all of this sounds interesting to you and you care anything for your career potentials, I urge you to sign up for this course today. Click the button below to take this course and start learning one of the industry-leading RPA tools. Hope to see you in the course. So what is RPA? RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation and refers to software robots that transact in any application or website, typically in the same way a human would, to automate complex and rule-based work. This results in more work getting done faster, with fewer errors and less overall expense. At its core, RPA automates business process by eliminating human interaction with internal applications. Here are some of the most used features that many RPA tools provide. Web automation. For example, this feature allows you to automate web interactions by identifying web elements and accurately manipulating them. GUI automation. This is the process of simulating mouse and keyboard actions on windows and controls. Screen scraping. This is the process of extracting data from websites and Windows 32 apps. Microsoft automation. Automating Microsoft Office applications may be the most used feature within any RPA tool. Citrix or surface automation. On many projects, you will be asked to automate processes via a virtual machine. In this situation, surface automation or Citrix automation is used because you cannot access the elements that make up the user interface. In this video, we're going to start by downloading and installing UiPath. First thing we're going to do is navigate to uipath.com. If we look under the developer tab, we'll see UiPath Community Edition. So we're going to double click this or click it. And if we click this button here, Get Community Edition, it's going to bring us to a page where we fill out our information. And then once we fill this information out, we're going to get an email where we can download the UiPath installation executable file. I already have it downloaded, so I'm just going to navigate over to my folder, my downloads. And I'm going to double click on it and run it. And this will install UiPath. Once we have UiPath Studio installed, we'll be prompted with this message to either start free or activate a license. If you've purchased a license, go ahead and activate that license. What I'm going to do is continue to start for free. And just put in the email address that you use to download. And close this window out. And so now we have our UiPath Studio installed. In this video, we're going to install additional activities. If you recall, we left off last video at this screen here. And if we click this button right here, it will take us to UiPath Studio. And then if we navigate here where it says Manage Packages, this will take us to where we can install additional activities. So by default, UiPath comes with the core activities, which is not a lot. And so you will most likely have to come here and just, so right here we are installed. But if we go to available, and then if we search, what I like to do is if you just type in UiPath, it'll give us all of the different activities that we can install for UiPath. So we just want to get this cognitive, which we probably won't use until probably later. We want to get the credentials, the database, Excel, Excel is pretty big, so it'll take a while. It'll take a few minutes, a few seconds. We won't need the FTP. We won't need intelligent OCR. We will need the mail. And if you want to, you can install these, but I'm not going to do it. I don't plan on using it. We'll install the PDF. Python. I don't think we'll use it for this video tutorial, for this series. Maybe in another series. Word. And we likely won't do any REST or SOAP activities. So the only thing we need from this screen is Word. And that's pretty much it. In this video, we're going to briefly discuss how UiPath works. To demonstrate, I will create a simple Hello World automation just to get you familiar with how UiPath actually works. The first thing we need to do is open up UiPath Studio. Once this open, we will be prompted with a message to continue with free or activate a license. If you have a license, please go ahead and activate it. I'm going to continue with free. Now we have a choice. We can create a blank template, or we can use a template, or we can use a recent. I'm going to create a blank, and I'll call this Hello World. By default, UiPath saves our projects inside of documents, and yours will be UiPath. I created a new folder, and so mine will store it in UiPath course. Just give it a name and click create. Once this open, we will see our workstation in different panels. In the next tutorial, I'll go over in detail what the different panels do. For now, let's create a flowchart. So come here and type flowchart. Drag it over. And this is our flowchart where we can add different activities to build our UiPath bot. The next thing we need to do is add an input. So type input, drag it over. Now we need to connect these two. Just drag down here and we have it. You can either fill this out by coming here and entering in the information, or double clicking. If we double click, we enter a title, which we're going to call Hello World, and a label, which is enter your name. And if we see it, it's right here, this label here and the title here. And then the output, this is where we need to create a variable to store whatever the user enters in. So if we come here, we can Control K and that'll bring this up. If you can't do that, just come here and create a variable. It's the same thing. So right here, we can give it a name. So output text. And then here, if you created it from here, just come here and type it, output text. And you can hide that. Now go back to main and search for a message box. If you just type box, it'll pull up, drag it over, and connect these two. Now inside of the message box, we want to display whatever they entered. So double click, and remember our text is output text. So click that in, enter. Now this is our bot. Let's run it to see. Hello world's the title. Our label is enter your name. Click OK. Voila. Michael Taiska. Pretty neat, huh? In this video, we're going to discuss the user interface and the different panels that UiPath provide. If you remember from last time, this was the main panel, which is where we use and create all of our code. All of these panels have options to float them. We can dock them back, and we can auto hide. This next panel is our ribbon. By default, it loads as design. And here we can create new sequences, flowcharts, or state machines. We can save our current project, we can run it, and we can utilize UiPath different functionalities such as web recorder, screen scrape, data scrape, create and manage our variables, and launch UI Explorer. This first tab is a start tab, and if you remember, this is where we created our blank project. We can open up a template, or we can reuse previous projects. We can also go here for help. This third tab is the execute tab, and this is primarily for debugging your code. You can add a breakpoint. You can remove the breakpoint. Sorry. You can step into the code and you can run in debug mode. This fourth tab is the setup tab, and this is where we would execute or create our published package. And if we click on that, it'll give us the package name, the package version, and this is what we will use to connect the orchestrator. We also can utilize different extensions such as Chrome and Firefox. By default, UiPath utilize Internet Explorer. Here in this panel, this is where we have all of our activities. And if you recall from last video, we can search for any activity that we have. We can add new extensions and activities by clicking here and going to install. We can search for some. We can look for search for some. We can look for updates or all. This here is where we get reusable projects such as the calculator and whatever else reusable components that you create. This project is where our current project is, and if you remember, we named it Hello World, and by default the first XAML is main. Over here is our properties panel, where different functionalities have different properties. So if we want to use a click and drag a click over here, this click would have different panels or different properties than the checkbox, than the message box. Down below here is our outline. This is the overall hierarchy of our project. So if you remember, we have the main, this is a flow chart, then our input message box, and then the click that we just created. We have our variables, our arguments, and here yours may be already docked, but I always click it as auto hide just so I can have more real estate. So this is our output, and this is what you would use for logging and debugging and writing to line. So here are, if we use our log, we have error logs, warnings, information, and trace. And in a later video, we'll go in more detail about these different logging. In this video, we're going to discuss sequences. A sequence is just a part of UiPath that allows you to create linear processes. One of the key features to sequence is that it can be reused time and time again as a standalone automation or as part of a state machine or a flowchart. If you recall, in the last video, we created a process with a flowchart, and we dragged inside a input as well as a message box. We could have easily put all of this code within a sequence. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and click New in Sequence. And by default, again, UiPath will save this sequence that we're about to create in your documents folder, in whatever folder inside of documents that you specify. So we're going to call it sequence 1. And now we have a new sequence created that we can always recall time and time again as a standalone automation or within our flowchart or a state machine. So now what we're going to do is the same thing that we did last time. We're going to search for an input, drag it inside of the sequence, give it a title, sequence 1 or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to say enter favorite football team. And then we're going to provide an output, Control K, fave team. And then now we're going to search again for the message box just by typing box. We're going to fave team. And so now we can run this without having to have the start and connect it from the start. We can just run it from here, and let's give it a try. In this video, we're going to discuss flowcharts. We're going to be creating a guessing game to allow a user to guess between a number 1 and 5. If you noticed, I've cleared my workspace. If you want to do the same, come to Clear to start and create a new blank project. Then you'll get something like this. So now we want to click New, Flowchart. And let's give our flowchart a name, Flowchart Demo. Enter. Now once you have this, click here in this gray area so it turn orange, and now we can create our variables that are within the scope of this flowchart. We're going to create 3 variables. The first variable is going to be int random number, a variable type integer. The next will be int guess number, variable type integer as well. And the last one will be string message. And we will give our string message a default value of guess a number from 1 to 5. Now click here to close it out. Now what we want to do is drag over and assign and connect it. What this assign allows us to do is to create a new random number. So inside of this 2, click Control Space, and that'll bring us up a list of our variables. Down arrow to random number, click enter. And in this part, we're going to type new random parentheses, open and close parentheses, dot next. If you want to just go down here, next, open parentheses, 1, comma, 5, close parentheses. Just so that you can see this. This is what it is. New random next 1 to 5. Now what we want to do is search for an input to allow the user to type a guess number. So for our input, for the label, we want to do Control Space and select our string message. And for our output, we want to Control Space and select our guess number. Now we want to search for a decision flow, a flow decision, drag it over. And what this allows us to do is give it a condition, a true or false. So for our condition, we're going to say if Control Space down guess number equals Control Space random number. And if that's correct, then we want to search for a box, message box, true. We want to give them a message. Congratulations, exclamation point. You guessed correct, period. The number was space plus, so we can concatenate the value. And if you just come here, so you'll see what I'm doing. Plus Control Space random number. And if you remember, our number is an integer, so we need to cast this to a string. So at the end of number, dot toString. So it's going to cast that number to a string. And if you have something like this, just go back to flowchart demo. And then now we want to do another decision. So we copy this, paste it, drag it over. And from here, we want to go to the top of this. And we want to look for another assign. And we want to change this condition. So now if our guess number is larger than our random number, then we want to give a message, so true. So that means the guess number is larger. So we want to assign to our string message a message too big. Please try again. And then we can copy this. Well, first let's bring this back because we're going to have them try again. Now copy this, paste it. And we want to go ahead now and bring it back to this. And this will be for our false. Again, our condition is if the guess number is greater than the random number, then this is too big. If the guess number is, if it's false, then that means the guess number is smaller than the random number. So we want to change this to too small. Please try again. And they will come back here and give another try. So let's give this a run. Guess a number from 1 to 5. Let's say 2. Number 2 small, try again. So let's say 3. Number 2 small, let's try again. 4. Correct. Congratulations, you guessed correct. The number was 4. In this video, we're going to discuss state machine. A state machine is a type of automation that uses a finite number of states within an execution. You can go into one state when triggered by one activity and then jump into another state when triggered by another activity. Another important aspect of state machines are the transitions. These allow us to jump from one state to another, and they're represented by arrows or branches between the different states. There are two activities that are specified within a state machine, namely the state and then the final state. The state's where you create most of your different activities, and then the final state is run at the end of the code. So let's get started. Again, if you notice, we have a blank workspace. So go to start again and then create a new blank workspace, or just clear whatever you have. And then we can do a state by typing state. And then we can find a state machine here, which is just a flow chart of the state machines. And then we have our different states, the final and just a regular state. Or we can come here and create a state machine. Both will do the same. So let me just show you. So if you drag this over, this will create a state machine flowchart within our main. And if we create this, it'll do a same thing, but give us a name that we can specify. So let's call it state machine demo. And let me clear this. Delete. Once we have this, what we're going to do is search for state. And you will notice that we have our state and then our final state. So let's drag our state over. And then we need another state. And then we need our final state. And let's connect these. So the first state is what we're going to do. We're going to initialize and create our random number. So let's search for assign. It's right here. And we're going to say create our variables. So go back to this, highlight it, and create our variable int random number of type integer, int guess number of type integer. And then string message of type string. And inside of here, we're going to type guess a number from 1 to 5. Close this. So go here, control space, random number, new random parentheses dot next open parentheses 1 comma 5 close parentheses. Come back here, and our first transition is just going to go to this next one. We don't have to have a condition, so what this will do is if we have a condition to make it come here, by default we just want to, once we initialize the random number, we want to come to the second state. Now inside of here, this is where we're going to search for our input, and our label will be string message, and our output would be control space guess number. Come back to this. Now we will need two transitions. The first one, if the number is too big. So once we just drag this back to itself, double click on this transition, and we can say, let's give it a name. So give it a name here. So this would be too big. And then let's say control. So inside of this condition, say control if the guess is greater than the random number. And if so, we need to do another assign and say string message too big. Please try again. Okay. Come back to this. And let's do another one. Double click. Too small. Int guess is less than random. Assign a string message. Too small. Please try again. And then now our final state would be if it's correct. And so we just double click on this and we'll say control equals random, and we'll give a message box. Congratulations. You guessed correct. The number was .toString. And we can give this a name. Correct guess. Nothing fancy here. Now what this will do is it'll initialize our random number, come here and let them guess, and if they, how many other times they get it wrong, it'll keep coming back to itself. So if it's too big, it'll come back. If it's too small, it'll come back. But if it's just right, then it'll go to this final state. Let's give this a try. Number from 1 to 5. Let's say 2. Number too small, 3. Congratulations, the number was 3. All right, and that's how state machines work. Open up UiPath, and then we're going to create our framework. So come here and select Reframework. You can select any name that you would like in any location, and you can also update the description, and then just go ahead and select Create. The UiPath has loaded, and you may see that it found some errors here, but just ignore those. Not sure why it's doing it. We can go in and look and see why it's happening, but it won't affect the bot. So just go ahead and select auto hide, and then you can maximize this window, and then you should see your interface look somewhat like this, or you may have an older version where the project and the activities are here, the library and the project. But at any rate, the bot will still work the same. So no worries if your interface doesn't look like mine. It just means that you have an older version. For some reason, UiPath, whenever I launch it, it forces me to update. So that's why my interface may look a little different than yours. So now let's discuss our design at a high level. We will be using our Excel files that we read from the email, and then we will process those using our SEC website and our Yahoo website. Now, a design best practice would have us to create 2 different bots. One project or one bot will be used to load those files to the UiPath orchestrator. And then once we have that done, we can have several bots run each transaction from UiPath Orchestrator. And that's what we're going to do. So again, we're going to design our bot by using two different processes. One will be our loader and one will be our process handler. And in this video right here, we're going to go at a high level overview of how the framework should be utilized. So here we have our Init State. And if you remember in our video earlier, we discussed the different state machines. So this here is our init state. And in our init state, we have our read, config, and initialize applications. So let's go inside of this and see what's happening. So in the beginning, we set our system error to nothing. And then if this is the first run, meaning if this is the first time that we run, because we're going to run multiple times depending on what our result comes here, we will either come here or come back to our init. Now, if this is the first run, the very first time that we run it in this transaction, then it will read our config file and it will initialize all of our settings, meaning it will grab all of our variable names from the config file and all of our settings from the config file. And then it will kill all processes because we're assuming that something may be lingering from an existing process. So we're going to kill all the processes that we would probably have open, and then we're going to initialize our application. And then this is all within a TryCatch. And if you're not familiar with a TryCatch, the try is what we're trying to do, and then if there's an error that exists whenever we're trying to do, we want to catch those errors and then do something about it. So in our try, we're trying to initialize all of our applications, and then in our catch, if we catch some kind of exception, we're just going to mark that exception as an error. And then we will notice down here, this is how we get either to our end process or to get data transaction data. It's based on whether or not we was successful or there was a system error. So let's look at our success. So our success is just saying if the system error is nothing, then we can go to success, and we can go to the transaction, the next state here, but I just want to go back so it'll be clear. So that was a success. Now this is the system error. Now, if the system error, this right here is the next one. If you remember, this was the first one. If system error is nothing, meaning it has no system error, then we can go successfully to the get transaction data. However, if the system error is not nothing, meaning that it is something, then we will log this. And we have different logs. We have the fatal, the error, warning, info, or trace, and those coincide with these here. We have error, warning, information, and trace. Now this here is a fatal because something happened to our system that we could not launch it. Again, this is our system. We're initializing our system. So if something happens, then we're going to go directly to our end process. And if nothing happened, like meaning we were successful, then we'll come to the get transaction data. Now let's look at the end process. So the end process is a similar way. We have everything within a TryCatch, and in our try, we're going to try to close all of our applications that we may have had open based on our initialization. So if we initialize some application in a web browser, then if for whatever reason we've hit an error, then we want to come here, we want to close all of those applications. And then if anything that happens within here, we also want to log this as a warning and then kill the process. Now, if this was a success, we will come to our get transaction. In our get transaction, we have a check stop signal. And this is if we're running our process from orchestrator, and then if one of our admins or someone tries to stop the process, they would click stop or cancel, and then the bot would read that and say, hey, we need to stop, and then it will stop it and it'll log a message saying that the stop process was requested. If there was no stop process, it will log it and say stop process was requested. And then we'll come here to transaction item equals nothing, meaning there was no transactions. And we'll see why we do that in a bit. Now, if there was no stop process, then we would get the transaction data. And we do this all within a TryCatch as well. And again, if there's any exceptions, we have our exception. And in all of our TryCatches, you will see that we also have a finally block. And we'll show you how this works when we look at the process XAML, or the process state, I'm sorry. Now, inside of this, we have our arguments. And arguments are, if you remember, are things that we pass to our workflow that we are invoking. And if you come here and you select edit, and we can see all of the arguments that we're passing to our workflow. Now, the conditions for our get transaction to decide whether or not we end this or go to the process transaction, these are the conditions. So the new transaction, meaning if we're going to go to the process transaction, then transaction item is not nothing, meaning that we have some kind of transaction item that we got from our transaction data, from our get transaction data. However, if the transaction item is nothing, meaning we didn't get any transaction items, then we'll log it, and then we'll go to end process. And so let's take a step back and let's look at this get transaction data. So again, if this item, whenever we run this, whenever we invoke this transaction, if we get some items back, then we will go to process transaction. If there's nothing, then we will go to end process. Let's open up our get transaction real quick. This is how it looks, but we're going to change this. So inside of our get transaction, what we're going to do is in our bot loader, we're going to read the emails inside of here, get those Excel files and save them to some folder. Okay. So now let's go back. Now, assuming that we did get, if we didn't get any data from the emails, there were nothing, then we're going to end the process. And if there was something, we'll come here, and then once it does this, it'll come back and it'll see, hey, there were no more emails, then it'll end the process. Now, let's say there are transactions that we got back. We did read the emails and we did download the Excel files. We're going to come to the process transaction. And then this is where we're going to read. This is where we're going to do all of our processing by extracting the data from the SEC site and the Yahoo site. Now, by default, it has this business rule exception as nothing. And this is the same thing that we saw earlier when it said the system error was nothing. So it has the business rule set as nothing, and then it tries to process this. And then if there was an error thrown, we're going to catch it. And so if our business rule comes back as an exception, meaning there is a business exception, and I'm not sure if we discussed it, but the difference between a business exception and a regular exception or a system exception is if the business exception are those type of exceptions that the business has to correct. Maybe the data is incorrect, or the data was not in a folder, or whatever those kind of reasons that the bot itself cannot handle, then those are business exceptions. Exceptions are system exceptions, internal exceptions, and all other kind of exceptions. So system exceptions are those that the bot maybe failed to find this element, the bot may failed at this step, or the application most likely wasn't open, or something to that effect. Now, if there was a business exception, then we catch that exception, and then we will mark the exception as the business exception. Now, if it was a system exception, then we mark it as a system exception. And then finally, we're going to set our transaction status based on either the business rule, the system exception, or the successful. Now, inside of here, we're going to open this up here, the set transaction example, so you'll see what's going on. And you can read this information, is very important, and you just take your own time to read this. Now, what's happening is, based on whether or not we have a system exception or business exception, come back here. So we have our business exception, system exception, or if everything was successful when we tried to process this. We have these three different branches. We have the success, and then the success will, if we're using a queue, it will set the transaction status, then we'll log a message, and then we'll remove any transaction log files, and then we will increment our transaction number. Transaction number equals +1. And then we will add our retry, we will reset it to 0, because if inside of our config file, we set our retry to at least 2 times, and I'll go over that in a minute. If we set it to 2 times and it was successful, then we're going to initialize this back to 0, because it could have retried 1 time and then incremented up to 1 and then 2, and then once it's finally successful, it'll say, okay, set it back to 0. Now, if there was an exception, meaning this right here, it said, the condition is business exception nothing and system exception nothing. Meaning if there is no business exception and no system exception, yes means it's true. However, if there was either a business exception or a system exception, then we'll come here. And now we'll say, okay, we know that there was either a business exception or a system exception. Was it a business exception? And if it was a business exception, then we'll come here. If it wasn't, then by default, it had to be a system exception. And then we'll do a similar thing here with these. We'll log our message, do our increment our transaction, because we're going to get the next transaction if it's a business exception. So if you remember, if our process fails because of business exception, then there's nothing that we can do for that transaction, and we just increment it and go on to the next one. So it's similar to what the success is, with the exception of we're going to be going to the next record, and we're going to be setting this as a business exception. Now, the system exception is handled a little bit different. Here, we're going to, if we have our queue set as retry, then we will handle that information. And then we're going to come here to our robot retry. And then inside of our robot retry, you just have to kind of read through this. So it's saying that if our config file is greater than 0, then we will see if we've reached our max retries. If yes, then log an error. If not, then we're going to retry. And then if it's not set as greater than 0, then we are going to increment our transaction. And now let's open up the config file so that this will make a little bit more sense. But as we go down, we'll see that we'll take a screenshot of the exception, and then we'll close all of our applications. And then coming back, to the main, we'll see this is how it looks. So if it's successful, then we come back and get the next transaction. If it's a business exception, then we come back and get the next transaction. And if there's an error, then we come here and we initialize our applications. And based on the number of retries, we would retry this same transaction. If we've reached our maximum retries, or if we do not have our retries set, then we will increment our transaction item and go to the next one. If we have not met our transaction, then we will retry the same transaction. Now let's see how that looks. And we also want to open up our config file. Just come here to project, and you can select this, File Explorer. It'll open up this. Then we can come to data, and then we can open up our config file. So as we look at our config file, if we come over here to constants, we will see that we have a maximum number of retry, and we set it by default as 0. And if you read this, it says must be set to 0 if using orchestrated queues. If greater than 0, the bot will retry the same transaction which failed with application exception. So again, that just simply means that when we are looking at our set transaction, and if there's an exception, then we're going to come to this path and see, first of all, is it set to greater than 0? If it is, then it means we're going to retry. If not, then we're going to come here to this path and we're going to increment it. So let's go back to this part. Let me close this transaction data out. And that is how the UiPath reframework is to be utilized. I hope this video was clear. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email or send me a comment. And just for clarity, I believe the reason why we're getting this error message here is because we do not have the UiPath credentials installed. And we see here our activities, we do not have it installed for our dependencies. And if you're having that issue, then you may want to go to our packages, and then let's see if that'll work. Yep, credential, uninstall. For some reason, say update. See if that'll help. And that did seem to clear that out. Let's see about our error message. It most likely won't go away until we clear it. And now if we open it up, if we close this and open it back up, I think this error message will go away. So if you want to clear this error, and if you have it, then that means just your UiPath credentials need to be updated, okay? In this video, we're going to discuss variables and how to manage them. We can create variables 3 different ways. First way is to come to the ribbon and click create a variable, and we have different options we can choose from. The second way is if we have a sequence, a flowchart, or a state machine in our workspace, we will get this option here to create a variable. So let's just give it a variable 1, string type, and let's just give it a default value. Now the third way is, let's say we have an activity which uses a variable. We can come to this properties panel, click Control K, and we'll see set name. And let's say this variable would be var2, variable 2. And automatic populates down here at the bottom panel. And by default, it's a variable type generic value. Now let's assign and then let's write this to the line. And run it. If we go to the output, we'll just simply get what the variables are. Now if we want to remove these variables, we just right click and click delete. If we want more variable types than the basic that comes by default, Boolean, integer, string, object, generic value, and array, we can go here to browser type. So let's say we're going to browse for data table, and we'll learn more about data tables in a later video. If we see data table right here, and we just click OK, and so now this is of type data table. Now, one thing that you will find very handy, let's change this back to a string, is promoting variables to global scope. So for example, let's change this name here to parent. This is the parent scope. And let's say we have a child scope. Let's call it child. And let's say we have this variable called, copy and paste this inside of here. We have a variable called variable1, and it equals Michael. And then let's say we have variable1, and we say it's, now we changing it to my last name. And in addition to this variable within this sequence, let's create another variable called favorite color. Fave color. Click enter, and let's give it a value of blue. Now, if we want to, so in this child this child sequence, we have variable1 and fave color. If we want to write out to the line var1, what do you think it'll be? That's right, Taiska, because we changed it in here. Now, if we want to output favorite color, what do you think will happen? We don't have it. We don't have access to this child variable because the scope is child. And if we see, the scope is child for fave color. Now, when we're creating our program, our bot, we have different sequences, and we want to try to access some of those variables, and we may not be able to figure out which sequence it's in. So what you can do is come here and click promote to global scope, and now we have it in the parent. So now we can come here and find fave color. And now we have it blue. Got it? In this video, we're going to discuss text variables. In previous videos, we touched upon text variables. And in this video, I just want to show you some different string manipulations that we can do with text or string variables. First thing we want to do is drag a sequence over. And as we did in previous videos, let's search for an input. Drag it over. And for the label, let's type your full name, please. And if you want to, you can give it a title. What is your name? Now let's drag over and assign. Well, let's give this an output. And this output will be called Control K, first letter, enter. Now let's say Control space, first letter, and what we want to do is display just a subtext of this first letter. So we'll use whatever we have here, do a substring on it, and assign it back to the original variable. So let's say substring, string first letter dot substring, open parentheses, and what it takes, if you see this right here, it gives us the starting index. So what is the starting index that we want to do a substring on? We can do it in the beginning and anywhere all the way to the end of this text. So let's just give a 0, which is the starting, comma, and then now the length of the integer. So let's say we want to give this the first only one length. Now let me just kind of clarify. So what this is doing is going to take whatever value we give it, and it's going to do a substring on it. It's going to start at the very beginning of that variable and just take one character. And we can specify 2, 3, 4, or we can also say string first in the entire length of that string if we wanted to take the whole string. But it wouldn't make any sense to do a substring if you want to do that. So now let's write to the line this string first letter and run it. So let's say Michael Tyeska and go to output, and you will see it gives us the M. Now that's just one of the many string manipulations you can do. There's so many different string manipulation that you can do, and as we get later into the course, you will see some of the different kind of string manipulation that we're going to do. We're going to split it, we're going to do substrings and some different things. But as we go through, I will point them out to you, and I will make sure that you see most of the common things that you will find on any RPA project that you will be on. In this video, we're going to discuss true or false variables, also known as Boolean. We're going to create a process that asks the user for their name as well as their gender, and the bot will use the Boolean value to determine whether or not they are a male. Let's get started. The first thing we want to do is create a flowchart, and let's give this flowchart a name, true or false variable. Click enter. Now let's highlight this and add our variables. The first variable would be string name, str name. The next one will be str gender. And the third will be bool male of type Boolean. And we want to give this an initial value of false. So just type false. Now we want to search for an input and drag over 2 inputs. Connect the first one. Let's give it a name of name. Let's drag over another one. Connect it. Gender. Give this a label. Please enter your name. And our output will be string name. This label will be please enter your gender. Output will be string gender. Now let's search for a decision. What we want to do is check to see if the Boolean, the string gender equals male, capital, and we can say or, copy that, male with all lowercase. Now let's search for an assign, drag over 2 of them, and connect them. Now if our input is a male, then we want to say bool male equals true. And if not, then bool male equals false. Now let's search for another decision, or you could just copy this one. And let's make some more space. So just click here to the right and drag down. And connect this to the decision. And for our condition, let's just say bool male. And by default, if you just enter just a Boolean, it will say if this equals true. So this is the same thing. But if you want to try to see if it equals true, then you can just leave it blank. And if you want to see if it's false, then you would have to specify equals false. Now, if it is, then we want to do a message box. Search for a box and drag over 2 of them. And let's connect them. Now for this first one, we want to say true. And then concat it with string name. Is a male. And for the false, we want to say false. String name is not a male. Exclamation. Now let's give this a quick run. True, Michael Tyeska is a male. I should have put space in there. Now let's try for the false. Let's use my wife's name. Sandra Tyeska, female. False, Cassandra Tyeska is not a male. And it works. So that is how Boolean values work. In this video, we're going to discuss numbers or integers. Number variables are also known as integer or int32, and they are used to store numeric information. They can be used to perform equations, comparison, pass important information, and many other things. In this example, we're going to create a simple example that adds 2 numbers together. So let's clear this, create a new, let's say flowchart, and call it numbers. Now the first thing we want to do is grab our inputs, and we want to grab 2 of them since we'll be grabbing 2 different numbers. So let's connect them and highlight this at the top, and let's create our variables. So we'll have num1, which is of type int32. We'll have num2 of type int32. And then we'll have sum of type int32. Now what we want to do is add our label. And give it our num1 variable. Let's change the names. Give this label of enter number 2. Let's say second number. And for this, let's make it the first number. Yep. And then let's give it num2. We want to drag over and assign and say sum equals num1 plus num2. And now let's do a box. And let's say num1 dot toString, and then say plus num2 dot toString equals sum dot toString. Now let's give this a quick run. Into the first number, let's say 7. Let's say 10. So now we have 7 plus 10 equals 17. And that's pretty much it for number variables. In this video, we're going to discuss array variables. Array variables are a variable type which allows you to store multiple values of the same type. For example, we can store an array of string, an array of integers, an array of objects, on and so forth. To exemplify how we can work with array variables, we're going to create an automated task which asks the user for their first name, their last name, and their age. Then we're going to store this information inside of the array and then write that array to a text file. Let's get started. First thing we need to do is create a new flowchart, and let's call it array variables. Once that's created, highlight it, click variables, and let's create our variables. String first name, string last name, string age, and then array first, last, age. And this will be our array. So if we come here and click array, we'll see array of T. The T stands for type. So if you click on it, you will have to specify a type. So let's choose string. Now we will grab our input, and we will need 3 for this example. The first one would be first name. Grab another one. Last name. And one more for our age. Let's connect these. And for our label, we'll say enter first name. And our output would be string first name. This one will be a label enter last name. Output would be string last name. Label would be enter age. Output would be string age. Now we need to grab and assign. And what we're going to do is assign these variables to our array. So control space, array. And then inside of here, this value over to the right, let's double click on the 3 dots, open curly bar, close. We can open curly bar, and we can select our first variable. So first name, comma, last name. And if you see a dot here, a period, remove it, comma, age, remove the period. Let's connect this. So now we need to grab a right to line. So type right and you'll see right to text. Sorry, right to text. And what we need to do here is specify a folder, a file name, and a file path. So by default, if you just give it a file name, it's going to store it in our current work in folder where we created all of our XAMLs. If you want to place it in another path, just give the absolute path. But for now, we're just going to give it a name. Let's call this array first, last, age.txt. And then inside of here, what we're going to do is use our array, and we're going to get the different positions. So an array goes by indexes, and the first index of an array is 0. So we're going to say 0, which is our first name, plus, add a space, array index 1 plus space age, which is the second index. And then let's run this and see. Michael, can I spell? TY 35. Now if we come here to our folder, we will see what we just created. And let's open it up. And we'll see Michael Tyeska 35. Pretty neat, right? And that will conclude arrays. In this video, we're going to discuss the date and time variables. The date and time variable is a type of variable that enables you to store information about any date or time. To exemplify how we will work with the date and time variable, we're going to create an automatic task that gets the user's date of birth and subtracts it from today's date to give the user's number of years. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do is create our flowchart. So come here, select flowchart, and give it name date and time variable. Once we have the flowchart, let's click this and create our variables. The first variable will be time today, and this will be a date and time variable. So if you don't see it in your drop down, which likely you won't, come here to browser for type and type system.date, and you will see it here, date and time. The next variable will be DOB, which would be another date and time. So just select it, it should still be there. And the third variable will be time span, which is a time span variable. So click the browser for type and type system.time, and you will see the time span. Now that we have our variables, we need to search for our input. So grab an input, drag it over, and connect it. Our label will be enter DOB, and our output will be DOB. Now we need to grab and assign, and we need to say time today equals now. So just type now. Now we need to grab another assign, and let's say time span is equal to convert dot to date convert dot to date. Where's date? Okay, to date and time. And then we want to bring our time to date. And let's bring it over here so we can see it better. And now we will subtract this from convert dot to date minus DOB. And now that we have that, we want to bring our message box. So type a box. And then our box will be our time span dot days divided by 365. Now what'll happen is, let's put this in the parentheses so that we can convert this to a string. Dot to string. Now what's going to happen is you will notice it will give us a number, but the number won't be entirely correct. So we're going to do something else, but let's test it first. (12/29/1982). So it'll give us 35 in some days. So to correct that, what we're going to do is come over here and we're going to use the math.floor function. So math.floor, and now if you type that in, it'll be inside of this parentheses. All of this stuff will be inside the math.floor, and we'll convert it to a string. So now this will give us our correct date. And again, math.floor is just getting the lower number of whatever number we have. So if it's 35 point something, it'll just give us the 35, and that's what we want. So 12/29/1982. Now just give us the 35. And that is how the date and time work. In this video, we're going to discuss data table variables. Data table variables are a type of variable that stores big pieces of information. It acts as a database or simple Excel spreadsheet. To exemplify how data table variables work, we're going to query from an Excel sheet one column and then display that information onto the screen. Then after that, we're going to select only a specific row from that Excel sheet, from that column of data, to show you some of the simple but yet effective manipulations that we can do on data table. Now in this tutorial, in this video, we won't go in that much detail about how data tables work, but in a later video, we're going to show you more information. We're going to have a section exclusively for Excel and then another section exclusively for data tables. And in those sections, we'll go in detail how to actually use the data table. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do again is to create our flowchart. So come here, select flowchart, and let's give it a name. Data table variable. Now we want to drag over let's create our variables first. The first will be, let's call it DT for data table. And we go here and select the type data table. So type it data table. And then you'll see it here. And the next variable that we want to create is a string. Just call it string DT, and it'll just be a string. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go to an Excel. Let's type Excel. It should be a scope, Excel application scope. We're going to connect this. Now, if we click here, this will allow us to select the Excel path, and I will provide you with the Excel sheet that you can use, or you can simply create your own. But what we will do is, once you get this file, you will go to your workstation and then just drag and drop this Excel database sheet in. And now if you come here, you can select it. All right. So now that you have that, this is the scope. It's just saying the Excel, which Excel do you want to do your manipulation on? So now that we have that, let's go to a read cell. Well, read range. Now if the Excel sheet, if we open it up, we'll get the name of the sheet. So the name of the sheet is called orders. So just right click here, go to rename, copy that, close it, and put it inside of here. And now let's get, so this right here is a sheet that we want, and what's the range? So we want to just say from G7 to G37. So what this means is we will get all of the rows in column G from G7 all the way to G37. And here you can select whether or not to use the headers. And what you want to do here is provide the output table. And the output table is this data table that we created. So just call DT. Right? So now that we have that, let's go to our data table. So search for data table, and we're going to print this out. Hit enter. Okay. So now we have our data table, and we have different functionalities that we can use. What we want to do is go to output data table. Connect this. Now what this needs is the data table which we're going to get, and then the output string that we want to put it with it to. So our data table name is DT. So select DT, and then here let's give it the string variable that we created. And then now let's select a box message. Connect that. And print out our string. And let's run this. So this is our data table that we have in that column. So column G7 all the way to G37. And it's just extracting this information from G7. If we go down, or I'll go up. G7, which is Bronsina Hoffman, all the way down to G37. And that's it. Make sure we close that. So now what we want to do is we also want to try to get a specific column, all right? And this is just something simple, but we'll go into more detail later. So before this message box, let's grab our assign. Okay. So let's put our string DT, and then the information that we want to select will be DT dot rows. And if you click dot, you will see a bunch of different functions that you can use. So we're going to select the rows, and we want to do row 10, and then we want to say field of, and what this is doing is saying what type of field it is, right? So column as string, so we want to say of string, and then we want to say 0 to return that single record from row 10, right? And so this will assign to our string just one record, and then we will print that out. Now let's see how that works. Pete Chris. Now if we go to our Excel, we will notice something. So we we said row 10, but it actually won't be row 10. It'll be row 18. And the reason for this is because one, we added the headers. So that's added one more row to whatever we're using. And then we started at row 7. So now we're actually adding 11 rows from row 7. So if we add this, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So row 10 in this case is actually row 11 because we added the headers. Let's go back. The headers whenever we did our Excel scope. So that's one more row added. And then because we started at row 7, it's 11 rows from row 7. So I hope that wasn't too confusing, but that's pretty much how data tables work. I hope you gain a lot of knowledge from this video. In this video, we're going to discuss generic variables. A generic variable is a data type where you can store any kind of data within it, including text, numbers, dates, arrays, any particular data that's within UiPath. If you recall in our previous videos, when you create a variable within the properties panel via Control K, UiPath automatically labels this variable as a generic variable. What makes generic variables interesting is because UiPath automatically converts them to other types in order to perform a certain action. However, it's important to use these type of variables carefully, as their conversion may not always be what you think it will be. To demonstrate this, let's get started. First thing we need to do again is create our flowchart. Let's call this generic variable. Highlight this and let's create our variables. The first variable that we need to create, let's call it int. And it will be a generic type. So we have to come here and search for it. So search for core. And then you should see generic. Generic value. Okay. The next one would be a string. But it will also be a generic variable. And you should already have it here. And then results or result. Generic variable. Okay. So now let's just drag over and assign. And let's say result equals int plus string. And while we at it, let's go back here, and for our int, let's give it a number. So 23 is our integer, and let's say 22. So what do you think will happen if we add these two? Will we get 45? Let's see. So let's say box. Now let's run it. 45. Now, even though this is a string, because we have a generic, it always converts the entire results to whatever is first. So because this is an integer, a number, then the outcome would be a number. But now if we switch this around and we say plus int and run this, we'll get 2223 because this is a string, and so it converted this integer over to a string. So those are some of the things you have to be careful with when you're working with generic variables. Before we end this video, I just want to point out a few things about different types of variables. So let's create an integer variable. Let's call it int var. And if you notice, if I try to name it the same thing as this, it'll give me a warning saying that I've already created a variable with this name. So just give it another name and call it an int 32 and var. And let's create a string var and let this be a string. Now, whenever we're using these variables, each type of variable has their own functions that you can do. So let's start with the string var. So if whenever you are using this variable, if you click this period or this dot or period, these are a list of functions that you can do on strings. And you just need to go through and like play with them and see some of the different things you could do. You can get the index of, so you can find the index of this. So like, for example, if you want to find the third index, it'll be 0, 1, 2, and 3 would be V. You can join it. You can get the length. You can, do a lot of different things. You can split. You can do a substring. You can make it to upper. You can trim to lower, to list. Like there's a lot of different things you can do. String manipulation that you can do with string, and the same for int integers. So let's say we're using this int var, and then we do this. We'll have our own type of things you can do with integers as well. You can change it to a string. You can to type. You can make it equals. You can compare it to something. And then let's do the last one, the generic type, and it has its own type as well. You can also compare it. You can see if it contains a certain word, equals, get the type of the length. You can replace some words. You can do splits, substrings. So basically the generic will kind of give us both the methods that we use on the integers as well as what we use on the strings and some others as well. So just go through this. Whatever variable type you have declared, just kind of push the period and go through and play with some of these methods that they have, methods or functions. Okay. I hope you found this video helpful. In this video, we're going to discuss arguments and how to manage them. Arguments are used to pass data from one project to another. In a global sense, they resemble variables as they store data dynamically and allows you to pass it on. Whereas variables pass data between activities, arguments, on the other hand, pass data between automations, thus allowing you to reuse code time and time again. Additional feature of arguments is it allows you to specify whether you're passing the data in, out, or in and out. To exemplify how to use arguments, let's create a simple automation where we invoke one other sequence and pass data to it. Let's get started. The first thing we want to do is drag our sequence here. And then let's create a new sequence. Let's call it pass arguments. Pass args. That's simple enough. And for here, we want to create an in argument. And we'll type it in arg. And what it's going to do is accept anything that comes in. And then let's just print that out to the screen. So we'll save a box in arg. And let's save that. And let's go back over to the main and let's grab an input. Drag it over. Let's give it a name. Enter your favorite color. And then here we're going to create our argument. Let's call it out arg. Change it to out. So if you see, we have in, out, and property. So for here, we're going to just select out because we're going to pass it out from the main to the pass args sequence. And then the next thing we're going to do is assign it first, out arg, and then let's search for invoke. So type invoke and select the invoke workflow file, and then let's click these three buttons, and we're going to search for our pass argument, and then we're going to import. And what that's going to do is import all of the arguments that we have in here so that we can connect them with our arguments inside of the main. And we can pass it variables as well. In our main, we don't have to pass an argument. We can pass the arguments a variable, and I'll show you that in a minute. For right now, we're going to say out. And then let's run it. Favorite color, green and green. And just to demonstrate that you don't have to necessarily pass it an argument, you can pass it a variable too. So let's create a variable, call it fav color. And what we'll do is we won't give it a, we'll come back here and then change this from being out arg to fav color. And then now we will edit our arguments and then type fav color. And now if we run this, let's favorite color blue. So you will notice that, again, just to clarify, that these are our arguments here. Anything that we're passing here is the arguments. Inside of our main, when we invoke this, we can, on edit, we can pass anything our arguments. We can pass an argument itself, or we can pass in a variable, as we doing here. Now, let's say we were here and we wanted to invoke another workflow. So let's create another workflow. All right. Let's call this child arg. But what we'll do here is, inside of here, we're going to create this. We're going to say, let's first invoke a method. And then inside of here, we're going to have our in and out, right? Just to kind of demonstrate what an in and out would be. So inside of here, let's go to an assign. And then let's create, say, change color. And we're going to specify in and out. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to pass that color to here, and then we're going to change it and pass it back out. Okay? So our change color will be purple. Right? And now whatever we come here would be that, import it. Let me save it. Sorry. And you will notice you have to save it for you to, in order to see it. So let's go here and import that. So now we'll say in arc. So whatever we get here, let's delete this. We're going to pass it to here. And then now we're going to pass that back to here. And then we could pass it back to main as well. Let's save that as an in and out as well. And then now our main, let's search for a box. Then now our main would be import. Let's create a variable. So we do have that variable. What I'm doing is I'm kind of getting all over the place, but I'm going to change this back to our argument, which is out arg. And then so now we're going to pass this our out arg. And then so now we're gonna print that out. And let's see what happens. So whatever we type here, we still should get purple back. So let's say red, purple. Type it again. Red, and still get purple. So just to kind of explain that again, what happened, we grabbed our variable, our argument here, and then we passed it as an in and out to here. And then once we got it here, we passed it as an in and out to here. And then once we got it here, we changed the color to purple and passed it back to here. And then because it's an in and out, we passed it back to the main. And so now on main, anything after this will have the new color that was changed. So right here, if we also put in a box here, we'll see our color is, say out color, out arc. We'll see that before it gets to here, it's going to be red or whatever we type here. So let's say black. Black is the first color. It goes in and gets changed to purple. And that's how arguments work. In this video, we're going to discuss the recorder. The recorder is a feature within UiPath that allows you to record your manual activities. This allows you to save time when you're creating different automations. And over time, you will see that it's very helpful. If we click here on recording, we'll notice that there are 4 different types of recordings: basic, desktop, web, and Citrix. The basic recorder generates full selectors for each activity, but no container. Now I know selectors and containers might not make a lot of sense to you right now, and we will discuss those in later videos, but a container, it acts as a container parent to an application that we're interacting with. Thus, it makes automations faster because if there's a container for this application, then UiPath is able to identify which applications these selectors belong to. But because the basic does not have a container, does not generate a container, it makes this automation a little bit slower. So this type of recording is usually suitable for single activities. The next one is the desktop recording. This type of recording is suitable for all desktop applications and multiple actions. It's faster because it does produce a container, thus allows them to be faster. The third is web recording, and this is designed for web applications and browsers. It also generates a container, which makes it more faster. The fourth and final type of recording is Citrix, and it's used to record virtualized environments such as virtual machines, Citrix, Cisco, and any other kind of remote desktop. Hello, and welcome to another UiPath tutorial. In this video, we're going to demonstrate the basic and the desktop recording. The first thing we need to do is open up our calculator, and then come to our ribbon and select recording, drop down basic. Now that we have this open, click record, and then enter in some numbers. Once we have that, double click escape. And then you will see a message, do you want to keep the recorded output? Select yes. Now we have our recorded output. Now in the previous video, we mentioned the container and the selectors. So if we highlight this and come to target, you will see selector. So double click or click on the 3 buttons and you will see these are our selectors. And this first part is our individual container, but it's not a parent container to this whole activity. And that's why this type of recording is a little bit slower. And as you see in this next example, we'll have this part as our parent container. So now what we want to do is let's clear this. Then go back to recording and select desktop. Let's clear our calculator and select record. Do the same thing. Double click escape, select yes. Now we'll notice we have this attach calculator, and this right here, this frame is our parent. And if you come to our selector, you'll remember that this was in our individual selectors, but now we have it as our parent, which makes it a little bit faster because we're saying that this here selector is our container to all of our other selectors, and this within a do. So on this calculator, do these activities, and this is what makes it a little bit faster. And if we come to our individual activity, we'll see that there's only one selector. In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to enable the Chrome or Firefox extension within UiPath. It's very simple. So on top of our ribbon here, the 4 tabs, we're going to go to Setup, and then we see Extension, Setup Extensions. Click here, and you can enable either Chrome or Firefox. I usually like to use Chrome. That's my personal favorite. So I'm going to click here, and then it'll just give us this message, restart Chrome to complete installation. Click OK. And we should get Chrome. Yeah. So even if you didn't click it, it should pop up on its own. And depending on your laptop and your internet connections, yours most likely will be a lot faster than mine. So let me close this out. This is what I open. And this is the browser that opens up once you click Chrome within UiPath. And as you see, I've already added it, but what you would do is just click here, click add to Chrome, just install this extension, and then you will have UiPath. And then, well, you will have Chrome within your UiPath. And that's pretty much it. Now, once you are using your navigation, you will have to use, let's attach the browser. Now within here, you will come over here and you will select Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, whichever one you want to do. By default, it's Internet Explorer. So in my case, I will select Chrome and then do my navigation. But we'll do this navigation in the next video. For this video here, I just wanted to show you how to enable the Chrome extension within UiPath. In this video, we're going to discuss UI elements. UI elements refer to the graphical user interface pieces that construct an application or a website. So in other words, when you go to a website and you have an input box or a checkbox, a radio box, a button, the browser window itself, or if you're on a desktop application and you have different buttons on that application, those make up the UI elements. And UiPath uses UI elements to be able to automate different processes. All interactions with the UI can be split into input or output. This categorization helps you better understand which actions to use in different situations. So for inputs, we have things such as the clicks, the text typing, keyboard shortcuts, right clicks, mouse hover, clipboard actions, etc. And for outputs, as we discussed before, we have the getting text, finding elements on the image, clipboard actions, etc. There are multiple activities that can be used to automate apps or web apps, and you can find them all in the activities panel. In this video, what we're going to do is discuss some of the common properties on all of the activities, and in the next video, we're going to go one by one through the most common activities that you would use on an enterprise application. So what we need to do now is let's drag over any activity. Let's drag over a click. And then if you pull this down so you can see the properties, we have continue on error. This specifies if the automation should continue even if the activity throws an error. So if you're doing some type of activity where you click in a button and it fails for some reason, this specifies whether or not you should continue to go or fail. And you will put a true or false here. By default, the value in this field is false. As a result, if this field is blank and the error is thrown, the execution of the project stops. If the value is set to true, the execution of the project continues regardless if any errors occur or not. The next field we have is delay after. This adds a pause after the activity. So if you want to do a click and then click here, after each click, you can just add a specified delay. And it will be in milliseconds. And we have delay before. It does the same things, but it just adds a delay before you click on it. The next one is timeout. So if you come here, this specifies the amount of time to wait for a specific element to be found. So for example, this target is where we input our selectors, and we have our selectors. And so right here, we can have this wait for ready. And so we can set it to none, and then we can enter in our own type of wait time that we want to wait. So if we know an application usually takes 1 minute to bring back results, we can set this as none, and then we can just select out whatever time we want. But by default, it's set as interactive. The interactive incomplete, it waits for all the elements on the target screen to exist before actually executing. So it waits for this whole, like a web page, to load and all of the elements on that page to exist before it actually starts executing. In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to manipulate the selectors to make your application more dynamic. The first thing we need to do is navigate to a website. And we're going to use sec.org. sec.gov. And once we're on their homepage, scroll down, and in here we're going to enter in, let's use Apple, app, and you will see Apple here. So select this, and this will pull up our Apple's filings. Now let's go back over to UiPath, and let's drag over a sequence. Then let's come here to our UI elements, UI automation, and come to elements and select click. Now if you click here, then come here and let's select this first document here. Now, once we have that, let's come over here to our selectors. And we'll notice that this says table row 2. Now, let's just do another one, just so we can see if this is something that we can make, or if this is something that's dynamic. So let's click here and let's go to this third one. We select this one, we'll see this table row 4. So it seems as though this is something that we can use that's dynamic. Now, let me explain. When you're doing your automation, when you're coming to a website, the bot doesn't need to be hard coded which row to check. You need to be able to make it dynamic to always get whatever row it is that you want to get. So let's say in our example, we want to be able to select all of the rows, each row, and select each document and then go to it. So the way that we can make that dynamic is if we see this table row as a number, and we know that this one is 2 and this one is 4, then we know that the other one was probably 3 and then 5 and on and so forth. So we can make this number dynamic. Now let's delete that one, come here and create a variable. Let's call it TD row, and let's change it to an integer. And let's give it a default value of 4. Let's call 4. Now, if we come back to this, our selector, now there may be a different way to do this, but what I normally do is if you select all of this, copy and paste, and then delete it, and click OK. And then if you come back here, now you'll get this selector and you can enter in an expression. So now if you type this in, you will have to first make all this, because it's saying this is a string. So you want to put a double quote here and a double quote here, then a double quote here, plus, then a double quote here. So basically all you're doing is you're putting you're making both of these strings. And then since this whole text is a string, you need to concatenate this first row and the second row. So you do that by putting a string. And then now we want to make this our TD row. So inside of here, we have a single quote, a two, and a single quote. We're going to remove the two, and then we're going to put a double quote plus double quote. Now inside of here, if we select control space, we'll see our TD row. Select that dot toString. Now we'll get that error go away. Now let's run this to see if it'll click on the item that we want. If you see, it clicked, and let's go back, it opened that up. If we go back, we'll see it opened up, I believe the fourth one, I can't remember. It opened up one of them and it went to that page. It was either this page or that page. I'm not really sure which one it went to, but it went to one of them. And that is how you make, well, that's one way you make your selector dynamic. Another way is, let's remove this and let's go back. So if you select a selector and then you want to change it, just click here and say indicate on screen. Now, and another thing is, if you want to pause while you go to a web page, just click F2 and you'll see this 3, 2, 1 down here at the bottom. Let's do it again. F2, and now you have 3 seconds. And then now the selector is back. So what we want to do now is, let's go back and select this first one again and come back to our selector. And another thing that you can do is, let's say, for example, this title changes. It's called, instead of saying Edgar search results, it's Edgar something else. We can put a star at the end to make it always, like this star, it represents a wild card. And what this does is it makes the page dynamic. So this right here is called Edgar search results. Let's say if we come here, it's called Edgar filing. So we know that the static thing is Edgar. So when you're doing your selectors, what you want to do is always try to make them dynamic. And by doing this, we can just say remove everything except for Edgar and then star. And what the star says, this Edgar is static and anything else after that. So whether it's Edgar documents or Edgar search results or Edgar whatever else. Like this one here would be view filer. Now this wouldn't work because it's Edgar. It doesn't have the Edgar in front of it. But anything with an Edgar in front of it will work. So whether it's Edgar search results or Edgar documents. Edgar filing documents. And that is how you make it dynamic. And another way you can make it dynamic is if you use this attached to browser. And what this will do is, it may not work on this particular website, but it makes everything dynamic for you. So you will click this, push F2 again, come back to our website, and select the element that you want to be dynamic. You select this and say selector was updated to match live elements. And what this means is this element is live, meaning if it changes for whatever reason, if the title changes or the row changes, it will automatically be updated. And so now it just changed this. This here was the same, but now we can see this right here and we can validate, and the selector is valid. So now we know that this has been updated to be more dynamic. And one last thing I want to just point out to you is if you open this UI Explorer, which is the same thing if we click here, it may take a while for yours to come up. But what this does is it gives you the entire DOM, pretty much the entire DOM, and you can select different elements that you would like or exclude different elements. And so we can add, it just kind of, the response is slow. So we can add this. We should be able to remove this. I'm not sure why we can't remove it. And then we can add others. And so we can use different elements or selectors in here to be able to make this more specific to what we actually want. And then you would just normally save this once you get whatever you want. But I'm gonna hit cancel because I like it the way it is. And as I was saying in the beginning, you can also uncheck whatever UiPath provided you by default. You can check it here as well. So if you don't want that, check it and it says omit. So it will omit the title. It will omit the application, which is Chrome. And you can even omit the ID. Now I'm positive that this will probably not work, but these are some things that you can do whenever you're manipulating the selectors, okay? In this video, we're going to discuss text recognition activities. These are useful in extracting text from UI elements on the screen, as well as extracting coordinates and other UI elements related to the text on the screen. There are situations when UI elements cannot be identified through standard means, and the text automation activity featured within UiPath enables you to identify buttons and checkboxes and other UI elements based on the text that these elements contain. As we've seen in previous videos, text activities include double-click text, click text, hover text, find text position, get full text, get visible text, extract structured data, and text exist. To get started, let's drag over our sequence. Let's drag over our right line over here. And then let's come to our browser and grab our open browser. Now let's open up our Chrome, or if you choose to use Internet Explorer, feel free to do so. Let's go to sec.gov. Come here and type Apple. Select this URL, minimize this, and come back here and put that text within a quote, double quotes. Now click on here, come to our properties panel, and if you choose to use Chrome, select Chrome. Now drag this right line up to here, and then let's go and grab our get text. So let's say get. So let's grab our full text. Click inside of here, push F2 to bring your browser back up. We click here. Let's first grab this text. Come to our output. OK. Type get text. And I've already have a name called get text, so I will use that name. But you likely won't have that name. Now let's write this to our line. If we scroll up to the top, we'll see what we just extracted. So if you didn't see it while you're down here, it's because you just have to scroll up to the top. So now that's showing the get full text, but let's show why this is different from the get visible text. Now if we select this again, click F2, scroll down, and then let's select somewhere down here at the bottom. And if we do the same thing, we will still get the same text. Well, not the same text. We will be able to find that text, which is this right here, filing, securities, information here. Now, if we swap this out with a get visible text and try the same thing, scroll to the bottom. So that we know where we are, let's select this one that says annual report section 1315. Then our output would be get text. Now let's run this. We get an error because the text is not visible. And that's the difference between using the get visible text and the get full text. The full text will be able to get anything, even if it's not on the screen, if it's not visible. In this video, we're going to discuss data scraping with structured data. Now, if you recall in the last video, we went to our SEC website and we got data using get full text and get visible text. Now, what we're going to do in this video is extract structured data. Now, you can extract structured data from any website where, of course, the data is structured. And what structure means is that it's put in a structure that's compatible with UiPath or any other tool to be able to extract it in that same format that we can paste inside of a data table or Excel or any other kind of data structure. So what we're going to do is copy this website, and if you don't already have it open, just paste it inside of here, remove the quotes, and just go back to the website. And now let's get our UiPath and remove anything that you have inside of this do. Click this right here and just select next, because we're going to select the field that we want to start. And we'll notice that once we select this, we'll get a window to say you selected a table cell. Would you like to extract data from the whole table? Now, every website will not be like this. And most times that you click, if you go to a website, what it would actually do is select one element, and then you have to select another one, and then it'll find a pattern within that. But because this is within a table, it gives us the option to select it as a whole table. So now we will get this. And if you come down here, you will see that it's saying the maximum number of records to get is 100. And if you want to get everything, just select 0. For now, I'm just going to leave it at 100. I don't want to get too much data. And we're going to click finished. And now we'll get this. And what this is saying is that it identifies an element that will allow us to navigate. And if you want to be able to navigate, select that element. And you can read this for yourself. So I'm going to select yes. Even though there's only 40 entries, if there was more, we have up to 100, so we could extract 60 more records if that was the case. But I'm just going to select yes anyways. Then I'm going to push F2 to get my window and scroll down. Then I'm going to select this next. Now we have our data scraping, and we're just going to drag this inside of here. Put it inside of our do. And if we come to our variables, we will notice that we have, this is duplicated because I did it more than once. We will notice that we have this data table that was created whenever we did our data structure. Now what we want to do is come to our Excel, go to app integration, come to Excel and get our Excel scope. And what we want to do is just give this a path. And again, if you remember from the last video, if we just give it a name, it's going to put it in our current folder structure. So let's give this a name, SEC data. Data.xlsx. And now we want to get our right range. And then we're going to write that data table that we have. And if we push Control Paste, we'll see that we don't see it in here. And that's because if you recall, there's a such thing as scope. So if we come back here, we'll see that our scope is only within here. So we can select this manage variables and then move it to global, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it manually, and I'm going to select this do. So what it's saying is that now this is the scope, and I could have made it where this sequence is the scope, but I chose to just use the do as the scope. And so now if I come here, control paste, I'm gonna control space, I will now see our data table. And so now if we want to add our headers, which I'm going to select that, then let's run this. Okay, so now if we go to our documents folder, we should see an Excel with SEC data. We open that up. This is our data. This is our headers and all of our records. And actually there were more than 40 records. So selecting that next button did give us more records. We actually got 100 records that we requested. And that is how you use data scraping. In this video, we're going to discuss screen scraping, which is similar to data scraping, but it's scraping unstructured data. If you recall where we left off last time, we used the data scraping feature in UiPath to scrape structured data. In this video, we're going to use the screen scraping feature. Now to get started, we're going to navigate to our website, which is sec.gov, and we're going to scrape this first screen. Now come back over here and let's just change this to and now instead of using this, we're going to just comment it out. So disable. What I did was right click and go to disable. And then we're going to use this. So push F2 to bring your screen back up. Now what you want to do is F2 again. Let's find some data that we want to scrape. Let's just say we're going to scrape this. We're going to scrape all of this text inside of here. Now what this is going to do is give us a result of what we just scraped. And it's unstructured, meaning that there's no columns and rows. Now, if we click generate table, we can select our columns. So how do we want to separate our columns? In our case, we're going to use the spaces because there's no tabs and there's no new lines in the data. Spaces. And then for our new line separator, we are going to use new line. And you can hit the preview button if you want. I'm just going to go ahead and click finish. And this is going to give us our new data table. If we click this, we'll see that our data table is called generate data. Now, if we come here, we'll notice that our scope is only within here. So we should just move this up and let's move it to our sequence. And the sequence is the entire sequence. Now that we have that, let's drag this up to be underneath here. Then let's change this from extract data table to generate data table, and we can write it to our same Excel file that we had. Now let's run this. Okay, so that has finished. Let's go to our project, open up that file, called SEC data. We'll see that we have all of our different columns, data. And that is how screen scraping works. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.